On today's episode of The Journey, got a treat for you guys. Over 50 years of hound hunting, dog experience, and we've got bird dog and hounds to date still working over 50 years. So today we're going to take another trip out west. We're going to Aztec, New Mexico, and I'm going to tell you a little story about this guest before I introduce him. So back in the early 2000s, Big Game Hunting website was up, and you could get on there and chat, the forum. You could get on there and chat. You could buy dogs. You could post dogs and post pictures and stuff like that. So that was my first experience with our guest today. And he actually helped me in a couple different realms of dogs and dog training, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you guys have been in this long enough, you know, you all of us would come home and start looking at the internet and look at the Big Game Houndsman website, and that's kind of where we done our business. So that was my first experience with our guest. He's helped me throughout a couple of those years. Back in 2009 is going to start it, and we'll tell you the story in a little bit. But today I've got Mike Leonard, Horses and Hounds, with me today. How's everything out in New Mexico, Mike?
Heath, it's great. We've got good weather. It's been cold and snowy. We've had quite a bit of moisture this winter, unlike the last couple of years that have been pretty dry, and that's good news for us being cattle ranchers as well. So it looks like we're going to have some grass this year. I think the cat hunters and snow lion hunters and stuff have done pretty well thus far with some of the storms that come in. And I don't much hunt in the wintertime with my dogs other than my bird dogs and stuff. I say most of my hunting is spring and fall hunting, and then we do our big game hunts. And so when it's real cold and nasty, I did a lot of that for a lot of years, and so I don't do too much of that. But it's a beautiful day today, and we can see the mountains in Colorado just to the north of us, and they're just covered with snow, and I know lots of guys are up there skiing, so
yeah,
it's a good time.
And you actually told me it was 55 there today. It did not break 43 here today, so you're actually warmer than what we are. And we took a couple short hikes today, nothing major. We went into a couple places and looked at some overlooks and hiked some ridges just to get outside. But yeah, so we kind of done the same thing.
Yeah. Yep.
So Mike, I'm gonna bring the listeners in to where you and our relationship started, and just talk about some things that you taught me, helped me with back like I said in the late 2000s, 2009. I was actually looking for some trail dogs. 2008, actually, looking for some trail dogs, and I was on that website what I was talking about, and you kept popping up, and I'd read your responses, and I'm like, I feel like this guy knows what he's talking about. Like, it was very articulate. It was good information. It seemed like it was solid information. So I was like, I'm gonna reach out to him. So I had texted you or sent you a chat, I guess that's what you would call it, looking for some trail dogs. So I wanted dogs that trailed. And when I had sent you a message, you had got back with me. And at that time, we had talked several times about Jeff Allen's line of dogs. And for whatever reason, I was not able to get a pup from him at that time. And then you pointed me in the direction of Topper. So I reached out to Andy Jensen and ended up getting my first Topper dog. And I can tell you, she was born April the 15th, 2009. I got her in, and I named her Nellie. And she was probably one of the most easy starting and natural starting dogs that I have ever owned. Like, I didn't have to do nothing but take her. And I was very impressed at the time. So you had led me into that with those dogs.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I figured You probably wouldn't remember that at this time, but
I do remember the conversation. Yes.
Yeah. So I ended up having her, and then we got. I don't know where this come up at, and I don't know how I got to asking you these questions, but through reading some of the posts on that website, there was people talking about drags and scent and all the things that houndsmen talk about, and I ended up calling you and talking to you about a way to train dogs on scent. And I did this. I did this numerous times. In fact, at the time, I had two blue dogs. Let's see, Belle died in 14. So Belle was, she was 5 years old at the time. But so I'm going to tell it, and then I want you to explain what you was telling me. So you told me to get a broom handle or a walking stick or something of the sort and wrap it up with duct tape and put a 4-inch paint roller on it. And I'm going to let you take it from there.
Well, it's a real simple method, and as most of the guys know that have been on Big Game Houndsman over the years, if you still to this day go to the home page and go to the top of the home page, and you'll see cat dog training up there. You can click on that, and that will outline that method that we're talking about. And this method was designed for younger pups, is what I designed it for, and is when you don't have the luxury to get them on a lot of cats all the time, sure, the real thing is always the best thing. But this impresses upon them and brings out their natural abilities. That when you're using good training scent, and I've always used Graz lures or Graz training scents out of North Dakota. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, Mr. Graw passed away a few months ago. I hope somebody continues the line of his trapping scents and lures, his gland lures, because they're by far the best I've ever used. I used the bobcat scent, I've used the bear scent, and I have used the lion scent, and they're very good. But by using the bobcat scent or the lion scent with the paint roller, and then by masking as much of your own human odor as you can, and it's impossible to mask all your human odor. It's virtually scientifically impossible. But dogs' brains are wired a little different than humans, and their noses are much like a computer with a grid pattern in them. And when they lock onto a certain scent, that's the reason a dog can get sprayed by a skunk and rolling around gagging on the ground, and 15 minutes later get up and cold trail a coon up and tree him, because they have a way of filtering out scents. And so you eliminate as much of the scent as you can, and then by using this paint roller, which is put on not horizontally but vertically down this stick, it's kind of imitating the padded foot of a bobcat. And as you know, we always talk about drags. Well, animals don't drag their body along the ground unless they're a snake. They step very, very carefully and precisely. And so you can set this track pattern up for these puppies, and then have some kind of a reward on the end. And generally, I'll detail a little bit more of it, how I do it. I generally start the track from the end, and a lot of people don't like that idea. I start from the tree and track backwards, what I do, because if you'll think, most of the time when you're trailing an animal, the scent is getting warmer as you're getting closer to the animal. Am I correct? Mm-hmm. So the closer you get to the animal, the scent gets stronger. Okay, so why would you start it where it's real strong, and then it gets fainter and fainter and fainter and fainter until it gets to the tree or wherever you have your prize, whatever it might be, a caged animal, or it might be whatever, you've got in a tree, a hide or something of that nature. So I usually do it that way, and sometimes you reapply scent, because if you're carrying it a long ways, and it seems to leave a real natural impression on good young puppies. And when I put the article out and started with, I had 2 puppies out of Topper again, and a female that I had, Toby and Nash, and you can see pictures of them in it when you go watch it. But they were heavily Nance bred, but they did have some Yadkin blood on their mama's side, and they were quick starting pups. And gosh, they took to it just like a duck takes to water. And before long, I was laying those tracks, and sometimes I was leaving them 7 and 8 hours, and we were covering some miles. And I've got an advanced method that I've also used, and I don't know, Heath, if I've shared that with you, but I'll be glad to do it, that you can use with. It's a little better for older dogs and colder tracks. But when we first started talking about, you told me, you said, I want trailing dogs. I want trailing dogs. Well, I love trailing dogs, and I've had all kinds of dogs. I want trailing dogs that run to catch. I don't want to just trail all day. I want dogs that run with a passion of catching something on the end. I've seen dogs that'll trail all day, and they may not get out of a football field. Yeah. And I don't want those. I don't want those kind of dogs. I want dogs that they have deliberate purpose, that they want to catch game. They want to see it, and but they have the ability to trail, and the sense to trail, and the sense to get out of the ground and go to the wind if they need to. But it's a viable method. I know some people have condemned it, and that's baloney. That's this and that. Well, that's fine. That's fine. But if you want to use it and try it, I have a gentleman from Montana, very good friend of mine, have become a very, very good friend of mine. And I kind of steer him in the line of dogs similar to what you have or had. And he was not a hound guy, but he just wanted to get into it. So I helped him get a really, really good Nance bred puppy. And boy, it wasn't any time. He had a couple of red dogs that he'd been working with, and they were pretty good dogs, I think. But before long, boy, he was catching lions like nobody's business. Well, lo and behold, he went and got another one from a friend of mine in California, and he just thinks it's a great way to get things started, especially in the months when you can't really be out there hunting, So.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I use that method. I haven't done it as much lately, but when you told me about that and we had talked about it, I started doing it, and I had good results. So I can't say anything negative about it. I like the theory. What really piqued my interest is when you got to talking about the drag and dragging, a hide or whatever it is that you use. That's not natural, and that's what
it disturbs too much ground too. Yep. It crushes grass, it crushes rocks, it makes fresh soil by scraping it up, and so those are all elements that sometimes a hound, like a bloodhound, can trail. Simply rubber booted tracks with crushed grass and foliage and stuff. He's not actually trailing the scent; he's trailing that different smell, and so.
Yeah, and we call that ground disturbance in the law enforcement side of it, and you're exactly right. So, yeah, I had good luck with it. I would still use that method today if I needed to do that right now. Then that's exactly how I would do what you're saying, because it's more realistic. Period.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. So you had, like I said, you'd point him in the direction to getting some, like I said, the topper dogs, and I ended up breeding her. Got some pretty good pups out of her, and then the pups out of her. Yeah, so they literally just passed this year, the two that I had left. So that was a 11, 12, 13 year stint with those dogs.
Sure.
That you had put me on back then. So
we still got them.
Yeah.
I mean, we of course, Topper passed away a long time ago, and we bred heavily onto Centerfire Samson, and which was very closely related, that same bloodline. And then my partner up in Colorado, he's still raising some out of that, and some of Jeff Allen's blood that was crossed back into some of Stephen Gallantine's blood out of California. And I mean, you talk about tremendous pressure track dogs. Oh my gosh. I mean, driven. Fast, blazing fast, cold-nosed dogs, hard tree dogs, pretty gritty dogs too. Not too big, but that's okay,
Yeah, the one that I'd got from Andy she was a medium-built dog. She was real leggy, and I mean, I would say she's probably 50 pounds, if that. 45 to 50 pounds, somewhere in there.
That's just, Topper was a big dog. When Topper was out of shape, he'd weigh 80 pounds,
Oh, wow.
Close to it. He was a big dog. He was fast, but he was a big dog.
Yeah. So
he looked more like an old Johnson's banjo type dog or house's bred dog,
big.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of times, in the history of those dogs, and that a lot of times people don't know where some of that stuff comes from, and it comes from way back, further than people think it does.
Oh yeah, those foundation dogs like that really, really go way back. And interesting, we mentioned, a lot of big game hunters, they have their own strains and stuff, and I did too and stuff. But a lot of the dogs influential dogs that were put into some of those strains were big names. Mm-hmm. And I was really interested to hear Jim Bueller and Steve Smith talking on Brett Vaughn's podcast about some of the early Walker influences they had in their pack. Mm-hmm. We're talking way back, Houses Bali, Spring Creek Rock, and those dogs like that. So that was news. That was news to me. I'd never been enlightened in that respect. I always thought they just had some secret out behind the barn deal, but they had some of that pretty high powered blood in there too.
Yeah, it all goes back to, it's got to start somewhere, don't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So, Mike, one of the reasons I wanted to sit down with you this evening and talk is, I'm pretty much in the bear world. That's kind of what I do, and that's my thing. We have bobcat here, and it's so interesting that we don't have a lot of people that cat hunt, especially the area that I'm in. Now, there's some people that do it throughout the state, but you don't see that a lot here. And I know when I was talking to you back then, that was one of the things that intrigued me is, the dogs that could take a track. And I'm like you, I don't want a dog sitting in a holler beating it to death for 2 days. That's not my idea of a track dog or a trail dog. So I was going to, want to kind of pick your brain, and especially the guys that cat hunt, what's your definition of a dog? What you're looking for? I know that you bobcat hunt and line hunt. And what's the difference in those dogs, and, some training methods and stuff that you use? So let's start.
Right.
Let's start with the bobcat. Let's start with the small.
Okay. Well, that was some of my very earliest exposure to hounds was with bobcat hunting. That was back when I was still in Montana, and I fell in with an old government hunter that had hunted for years and years, and he was a devotee of bobcat dogs. And in the area that we were hunting at that time didn't really have any cougar population. It does today. It's changed dramatically, but back then it was very, very rare if you would see a lion track. So we concentrated on bobcat, and we did coon hunt quite a lot too. And I would pick his brain because he was a very astute guy. His name was Leo Riley. He was an old cowboy, and just to look at him, you'd think, well, this guy, he just, probably doesn't really think too much about this. But he had a track record behind him of cat catching that was just tremendous. There were 2 or 3 hunters in the state of Montana back in those days that were pretty well known, and Sherman Hayes, Cougar Lee Fatoris, guys like that caught a lot of cats, and I would have put Leo up against any of them with his dogs. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, Leo, I started out with dogs. I just like every other kid when I started out, I picked up a junk dog here and I picked up a junk dog there, and I had trash races, and that was before we had telemetry, and I didn't have any shock system or electric collars. I was just banging my head against the wall, and I ran into Leo. I didn't really know him and stuff, and he was kind of an intimidating, imposing looking guy. Just to look at, he was a cowboy hat on and a fringed buckskin hat. I knew he was this trapper hunter guy, and stuff. And he said, "Hey, I want to talk to you for a minute." Oh, okay. I don't know how old I was. I was probably 18, something like that. And he says, I was a little older than that. No, I had to be 21 because later that year I saw him on jury duty. He was a bailiff. So I had to be about 21, I think. And I'd had these dogs for a couple of years. I've been fighting it. But anyway, he said, I heard you got some hound dogs. And he says, yeah, I do. He said, well, I'd like to take a look at them someday. And he said, I've got some hounds too. And I said, oh, well, I'd like to look at your dogs too. He said, well, why don't you just follow me to the house right now? And I'll show them to you. So I did. And I drove over there, and he had kind of a rustic little place. And he had about a half a dozen hounds out there. Most of them were black and tan colored. Some of them had some white markings on them and stuff, but he had a couple of blue tip colored dogs too. He said, yeah, he said, these little black dog crosses that I have here, these are essentially my cat dogs, my bobcat dogs. He said, they're a little different than these blue dogs here. He says, I use these blue dogs mostly for coon. He said, they will go on cat track. They're pretty good, but they're not what I consider real catch dogs for bobcats. And I said, okay. Well, he said, you want to go hunting with me sometime? I said, yeah. And he said, well, I want to go look at your dogs and stuff and all that. Well, I had a couple of crossed up Walker pups that were just trashy. Oh my gosh, they were so trashy. And I just was having trouble keeping them straight and doing anything and catching anything with them. And I was having a terrible time. I mean, we'd get a deer going and they'd run it all night. I mean, they would run. Well, long story short, he finally talked me into getting rid of those dogs. And he said, you get rid of them and I'll give you a good pup. I said, well, I'll see if I can sell them. He said, well, no, that's not what I mean. He says, you need to get rid of them. You don't pass your misery on to another guy. He says, you just get rid of them and I'll give you Mooney, which was a young dog that he had crossed our blue dog. And so I did. And gosh, that dog only lived to be 4 years old. And he was just absolutely fantastic. He spoiled me right off the bat, that dog did, because he was so good at everything he did. I mean, he went from just kind of a big old goofy pup to catching bobcats, coons, whatever I put him on in just no time. He had one trash race in his life. I gave him a good hard threshing, and that was it. After that, he was just like a check dog. And what a dog, but what a difference it made, to have that blood. And I think what separated the dogs from the bobcats, really, they had to have a good dog, but a lot of times we ran a lot on the bare ground. We didn't all run in the snow. We ran on the bare ground too. But we were running fresher tracks. There's no doubt about it. We weren't running many hour-old tracks, maybe an hour old or 2 hours old, but we were striking those tracks. We needed a dog that could get them up and knock the wind out of those cats. We needed a dog that was not silent, but not real wide open. And those cats would, if you pressured them too hard with too much mouth and stuff, they'd go to blowing into holes or under boulder piles and things of that nature and stuff. You needed a dog that could really get to driving that track hard and fast, kind of knock the wind out of them. And you didn't catch them all either, but we caught a fair number of them. But I had a dog he had a dog called Jigs, and I named a dog of mine that later in life. He wasn't near as good as his dog was, but this Jigs dog, you could almost see this dog thinking as he was starting to work that track, and he was almost like he had a sixth sense about him, and he would just, where other dogs were struggling and stuff, he would breeze through the losses and just get it again and go. And I don't think it was because he had a superior nose, but I think he had a superior intellect about him, whatever you might call it in a hound. And he went through it, and next thing you know, he'd be caught. And I was just, my goodness, what a dog. And he was such a good dog that he wouldn't let him ride in the back with the other hounds. He said he'd ride in the front of the pickup.
He favored him a little, huh?
He favored old Jigs, yeah. And so anyhow, it was just something about bobcat dogs that it really intrigued me. And Western bobcat hunting is a little bit different. I know there are people run them in the piney woods country, and it's different there, or hunt them at night. There are people in South Texas that run them like fox and coyote, how they kind of run a pack of running dogs, which is very effective in the brush country and stuff. There's guys down there that really have some fabulous dogs. But out here, we have to trail them down and tree them, or bay them in a hole, which I don't like because a lot of times you can't get them out. But so I try to hang to the bigger timber country and stuff. But to me, a really good bobcat dog, a really, really top bobcat dog is kind of the pinnacle of what I think in a tree dog. They're really hard to find. They're very hard to find. Andy Jensen is a really good bobcat hunter, and he really knows, and he's stuck with that line of dogs for a long time for a certain reason, because there are just a lot of them that go back to the original topper, And of course, the original Topper was the only 2-time back-to-back world champion bobcat dog when they used to have the Bobcat Futurities. And that was Nance's little Topper that Bob Marosic ended up buying and taking to Sheridan, Wyoming. But he was kind of the quintessential bobcat dog, and that with bobcat line was really something special.
The Journey on Houndsman XP has teamed up with One TDC. This dual-action support for oral health and mobility in our dogs. This unique supplement is so effective that it is recommended by top veterinarian experts worldwide to maintain and improve our dog's health in 4 different areas. Their oral health, hips, joints, and muscles, skin, coat, energy, and recovery. Guys, I've been using this product for the last 6 months, and it has been a game changer for me. If you're looking for something to help with the overall health of your dog, go to worksowell.com and give this product a try. It is highly recommended by Houndsman XP here on The Journey. You had told me earlier in our conversation that there's one thing that separates a bobcat dog, or do you think that it has to have more so than the other dogs? You remember what you were telling me?
Well, there are several things. Of course, the high IQ that I think was that the drive. They've got to have that just unbelievable drive to catch, the run, the pressure to catch. They've got to have that. And I'll tell you, I truly believe some of these dogs use their ears, and some of them have the ability to hear. I've seen some of those really good cat dogs stop and listen, and I don't know what they're hearing, but sometimes I've had cats sneak right back by. I've watched cats a lot of times with a whole pack of dogs trailing behind them, and I've seen cats squat down and stop and have the dogs trail right by them, by a bush and stuff, and that cat pick up and walk out the other way and just go on, and then bust into a gallop and go over a top of a point or something. And I've seen these dogs just stop and listen, cock their head a little bit and turn around. I had a dog called Gunner that was really pretty good. He came from Jeff Allen. He was a blanket back walker dog, but he was phenomenal with his ears. And I really believe it set him apart. And he was a heck of a dog to turn a track around. Out on the dry ground a lot of times we end up back trailing at times. It's just the nature of things. The way you're going, the way the dogs want to go, and when tracks get really faint, not so much on bobcat, but on lion. And a lot of dogs will get on it backwards and they'll just go and go, and you got to turn them around if you can, because you don't catch very many of them going backwards. But I have caught a few lions going backwards, but it was purely by accident. But that dog, he was phenomenal, because I remember Jeff Allen and I were sitting on our horses one time over on the north rim of the Virgin River country. And we had a big pack of dogs that day. We were running about a dozen dogs, and we had an old line track going. And the dogs, it's amazing to watch dogs work when you have that many of them and they've got the track going, and they kind of start leapfrogging it. And you got all these dogs working close together, and they're so close together they look like a big blanket moving. And it's just like a living organism moving that track. And we're sitting there watching it and stuff. And Gunner, all of a sudden, I see him, he's off to the side, and he's coming back towards us, and he's kind of leaping in the grass, kind of leaping like you've probably seen dogs chasing a rabbit or something before. And he's kind of jumping up and jumping. I says, Jeff, what's that crazy dog doing? He says, that old son of a bee. He said, he's got the track. We're going backwards. I says, really? He says, no, he figured it out. We're going backwards. He says, turn these dogs around. And sure enough, old Gunner, he'd figured out that track was going the wrong way, and he's bedding back the other way, and we turned it around and run the line,
Oh, yeah. Well,
and it just, superior intellect that goes along with that. I don't know. I sometimes think, I kind of believe some dogs are clairvoyant. I know people think I'm nuts, but I do believe there's a lot of clairvoyant things that go on in animals' minds that we don't understand, be it predator or prey. And there's a lot of things that we still haven't got it all ironed, all the wrinkles out of it yet. But I've seen so much stuff out there over all these years of hunting that sometimes I just scratch my head and just go, wow,
Yeah. How did that happen?
How did that happen? Yeah.
But you told me when we were talking about bird dogs that that's one of the things in your bobcat dogs is that dog able to pick his head up and do some winding.
Yeah, you've got to be able to go into the wind, and they've got to be able to drift the track because you're going to hit some dead spots. And these dead spots are not, which I know we're going to talk a little bit about again. It's not because the animal really alters its scent. Some things could change their scent when they're hunting. They're actively trying to sneak up on a rabbit or a deer or something. I think sometimes it changes a little bit, or maybe closer to the ground where they're stalking rather than just walking along or trotting. But it does change, and so it's different at times. But you'll hit those dead zones. You might get into some coarse rock or gravel hillsides and stuff which don't hold scent very well or something. And the dog goes in there and it's like he hits a wall. He's like, and he's just grinding through there where he was moving it before, where he had vegetation and maybe rocks and brush and stuff brushing against the animal a little bit more, whatever it might be, or the ground might be cold, warmer there for some reason. The sun may have got on it and burned it. Ultraviolet rays they play heck with scent and different things. And he gets across there, and if that dog just hangs up in there, hangs up and is working and working and working, he's never going to catch a bobcat. He's just not going to do it. That dog has got to go to the wind, and he's got to start drifting out and drifting out and drifting out. And that's that smart dog that'll do it. I'm not saying that and we'll get into the lion dog thing too, but I truly believe that the best lion dogs is that dog as well.
Yeah. Now, so are you guys, and I don't know, do you guys run the same, I'm assuming you run the same dogs on bobcat and lion, or are you using different? I heard you just said the guy that was teaching you used two different types of dogs.
He did, but he was hunting basically for fur and stuff, and he did take those blue dogs, some of the bigger blue dogs. He did take them when he was bobcat hunting, and he was hopeful that they were going to get, and they did get better. They were good dogs. I mean, they would go, and sometimes they'd catch a cat and stuff, but they almost never catch a cat in front of Jigs or Ikey, or Pike. Ike, Pike, and Jigs were the three cat dogs that were always out in front and almost always seemed to catch on that. And on coon, those dogs really didn't. They go catch a coon and stuff, but they were kind of like ho hum, okay, let these guys, no big deal. We'll go, but we really don't care that much about it. Where the blue dogs, the Vaughn dogs that he had, I mean, they were just slammed up coon dogs. I mean, they were good, and beautiful to listen to. The other dogs kind of had high, shrill mouths and didn't sound as pretty as those big, long ballers. And I still love a big, long, ball-mouthed dog.
I think we all, I do too. I'm with you. I like a ball-mouthed dog on a track and come over to a steady chop on a tree. It don't have to be a blowdown, but I got ball-mouthed dogs on the tree too, so I'm not picky.
Yeah, I'm not picky. That first dog spoiled me. I said the blue dog I got from Leo, I mean, he was just the longest quivering ball on a cold track, and it had tightened up a little bit, but it was deep and mellow. And when he came down, and he just died at the tree, just, ow, 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 and that was it. I mean, just hammer. I mean, a 3-year-old could have called treed,
Yeah, yeah. And I know that, when we had talked back then too, that, and I guess anybody that's able to hunt cats and bear, if you can do both, of course, the bear puts off more scent. I mean, we know that. They're
up to a point.
Yeah, the bigger animal.
Yeah,
they're smelly. I mean, I can walk in a laurel thicket and smell them.
But I always contest that a hound can trail an older lion track than they can a bear track. Bear track is light. Bear scent is light. It's strong, but it's light and it's airy, and it doesn't last. We've got lots of hounds out here that can trail a 2-day-old lion track. I mean, if the conditions are right, you're not trailing any 2-day-old bear tracks. If you trail a 10-hour-old bear track, I mean, that's an old bear track because that scent is so different. Where that lion scent is heavy, oily, low scent that lays low on the ground. Where a bear, when he moves and stuff, yes, his pads, I'm sure his pads, they sweat some just like a dog's pads and stuff, but it's just different. It's just higher scent. And when it's fresher, yeah, it's strong. It's very airborne, and that's the reason bear dogs generally carry the track much faster because it's airborne and they're up in the air, and they're running it that way. And I'm telling you, with especially bare ground lion hunting, unless the lion is pretty close, you don't burn down a lot of lion tracks like you do a bear track. I mean, just smoking it, roaring, and going. But it does happen. If you get it fresh and you have some of the right dogs, you'll be surprised how much pressure they can put on it. But it's different. And I hunted a lot of bear. I mean, and I like bear hunting. In fact, I got consumed with it to the point that I was kind of nuts. Kind of went off the deep end with it for a while there. But when I hunted, I used to hunt bear in Colorado a lot before they closed the hound hunting up there, and it was just fabulous bear hunting, just wonderful. And I had some really good bear dogs. I had some strains of dogs that were pretty darn good bear dogs. I mean, we caught a lot of bear. But when they closed that up, and things kind of changed in my life for various reasons, I finally started hunting lions on the bare ground more and almost exclusively, and hunting horseback most of the time. And I was doing some depredation work and doing some work and helping the state and different things on problem lions and stuff. I found that I couldn't maintain a multi-purpose pack anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what I did before. I would run bear in the fall or in the spring. We had a spring season back then. And then in the wintertime, of course, the bear denned up, and we just run lion and try to run cat, But when I started having to hunt year round, there's just so many more bear, and you're just so much more likely to get on one that if I was after a problem lion, and then my dog struck a bear, they'd be gone, because a bear will run, and you know how bears will run. Sometimes they'll run 20 miles.
Yep.
And you're done. You're done lion hunting for the day. So I finally had to start not only, choosing dogs that weren't quite so wound to run bear, but also bumping them off. And I didn't have a lot of problems later, with that. I could tell if there was a fresh bear around. They generally let me know, but I could tell if it was a lion or a bear, and I just talked to my dogs. I always put a handle, from a bird dog background, my dogs are whistle broke. Most of my dogs will take hand signals. My hounds will take hand signals and things. So I could just move them along on my horse, and they've got to be able to be able to hunt those kind of conditions, It's different than just driving around in the snow and finding a track crossing the road and wrestling them out of a dog box and sticking their nose in the track and booting them in the rear, and away they go, and the next thing you know, with your telemetry or your GPS, you find where they're treed. But when you're out there free casting and you might ride 25, 30 miles a day, your dogs have got the handle,
Yeah. And I mean, I don't have the opportunity to do, I have been out to New Mexico and hunted lion off a horseback, and
Good.
like that to me is like it's like the all-time, like it doesn't get any better than that for me. Like
well, you're a wise man. You're a wise man.
Well, I mean, I enjoy being on horses, being able to follow your hounds and actually watch them work. Like,
isn't that great?
Yeah, it is, and you learn so much.
That's the true. Oh, you do. I learned so much, and and I walked a lot too. But when you're a horseback, and you have a good horse and you're in good horse country, those dogs accept you as a different portion of that pack. And they really do listen to you because they know you're mobile, and you really get to see those dogs work. And I have a lot of guys, they tell me, well, I can tell by my GPS which dog is out ahead and which dog's here, which dog. I've got Garmin's. I mean, I use them. Why wouldn't you? But I mean, I want to see my dogs working. I want to do that. And so being horseback is a great thing, or on a mule. If you favor mules and all that sort of thing, it is a great thing. And bear hunting, really, and I would love to hunt sometime over where you're at. It's beautiful country. Some of the country we have to hunt bears in out here is so unbelievably rugged and roadless that most people wouldn't hunt. If they didn't have GPS or at least telemetry, they wouldn't hunt, because you just lose your dogs. Essentially, your dogs hit a track, they're gone, and you go looking for dogs. And that's what you do. The canyon swallow them up, unless it's a short race. You hear, so you're hunting for beeps, and then you're walking to beeps or whatever you can do to get to them. Especially if you're in the wilderness, if you got the luxury of roads and stuff, but a lot of times you don't. So
Yeah.
You don't really get to see who's doing what unless somebody's there videoing it. It's kind of funny sometimes too. You watch some of these bear hunting videos and you see the bear cross the road and then run across a meadow or something, and you think, man, those dogs are pressuring that bear. They're chewing him up. They're eating him up. You got dogs coming along, and they're just kind of loping easily along. The bear stops, and they stop. Sometimes it's not always the way you think it is.
No. But hunting from horseback and being able to watch, I mean, I wished I could do it here. That's just something we can't do. But that's the all time for me. So, let's switch over to the lines real quick. Difference in the line and the bobcat. You kind of told us what you're looking for in the cat dog, bobcat, and you've kind of explained it through talking about the bobcats. And then I want to get into a little bit about the odor.
Okay. Well, the lion thing on bear ground, and I'm not going to talk about snow hunting. And some snow hunting is difficult. It depends on the condition of the snow and different things like that. It's dangerous. It's physically demanding. I don't take anything away from it. It's just non-comparable to dry ground hunting because you are relying upon the nose of the dog. Mm-hmm. Your eyes, you can see a track sometimes. You're riding along, you'll see a track, you'll find a track, something like that. But it doesn't happen very often. You're relying on the eyes of that dog and the ears and the nose of the dog to detect what's going on in his presence. And so you've got to have a start dog. You've got to have a start dog. And I just think that it's not only just cold nosed, but it is the drive that a dog has, to be able to desire to go out there and find that track. And I'll give you a reason why I say that. I've seen whole packs of dogs that were bred very similarly. And they're old time bred. Oh yeah, they've got Lee brothers in them. They've got this and that, Arizona blood and all that. And they all look the part, and we know they can trail. And you're out there on your horses and mules, and you're riding along. The ground's hard. You can't see anything. You can't, and the dogs are plodding along and they're hunting here and there a little bit and stuff. And some dog will go off, and all of a sudden that dog will strike a track. And the other dogs, 7 or 8, 9 other dogs had walked right over that track. That old dog finds the track, and he opens. Oh goodness! Everybody jumps up and runs over there. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, then what happens? Oh, we can smell it too. We'll go to work on it too. And they walked right over it. They didn't care to do anything with it. And old Wimpy goes over it, and he smells it. He opens, and now everybody's working. It takes that dog that wants to start that track. He's a natural. Sometimes he has that little bit of a sixth sense. He knows where to look for a track. He knows where to hunt smart for a track. But he wants to start it, and you've got to have that. And then a lot of times you've got to hustle over there and make sure they're going the right way. Try like ever to find a track in the ground, and you can tell if you're going the right way because you don't know sometimes, and a lot of times you'll end up on the back track, but a lot of times you won't. You get them turned around and go, and they've got to be able to carry that track. Lion dogs is a patience game too. They've got to be able to have a lot of patience and work, because a lot of times it's a long trailing, lots of what I love watching it, and I think you would love watching it. But sometimes some people say, oh, it's monotonous because they're working, and the last 15 minutes they only made 100 yards or something like that. Well, that was a good 100 yards, and then oh man, they got up on this ridge and they picked up better. Now they're 500 yards away, and then it slows down, and it's just a whole different thing. But it's kind of like a detective game too. Once you're in there, you're kind of like looking for clues and looking for sign. You're riding along and trying to help the dogs, looking for little things and clues that you can pick up. But the dog part of it, it's got to be that dog that really wants to strike that track. You've got to have that dog. Without a start dog, dry ground hunting, you're sunk. You're not going to ride around enough and find enough tracks to be able to do it. So you've got to have that start dog. And I wanted all my dogs to be start dogs. I wanted to breed dogs that wanted to start tracks, and we've kind of done that with these last little bunch of dogs that we've got. And Neil's hunting them mostly now up in Colorado, but these dogs, I mean, they're tracky. They want to start and they want to drive a track, but they will start an old track, and you've got to have that, So
I think it's interesting how you said, how the old dog picks up a track and the other dogs just run past it. But once he picks it up and opens, here
yep.
comes the pack.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I smelt this, but
cheerleaders.
yeah, I smelt this,
Yep.
but I didn't want to. I didn't want to waste my energy on it.
Yeah, yeah. And oh well, the old timer thinks it's worth it. Now we're all in here. Yeah, yeah. Dad'll pet us. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, but I wanted to have multiple dogs that could do that, and I did have, but I've had some certain dogs that just stood out in that respect. I've had dogs that could actually wind a starting point, and that's kind of phenomenal on bare ground.
Mm-hmm.
My Big John dog could do that, and then later on, kind of related in the same line, Big Ben, and I'd see him throw his head up, and I might see him break into a slow kind of a lope, go down through the bottom of a little canyon, go up a header on the other side, and he might go 200-300 yards, and then hit a track and just go, and he winded that track that far away. The other dogs didn't have a clue it was there.
Yeah, I'm like you.
Now once he blew, they went.
Yeah, I'm like you. I want all my dogs to start. I'm not there right now with the pack that I have, but I want them all to start tracks. And it seems like it takes a special dog to be able to wind like that and go find that starting point.
I've got a German Shorthair female here, bird dog, registered female. She's a phenomenal little dog, but I've got 3 other dogs out there in the yard that I know have got really good noses on them. I would, put them in the class of being pretty cold nosed with things as far as, especially I do blood trailing and things of that nature and that kind of stuff. But I'll watch this female, and I've done a lot of wildlife right around my little area here out of Aztec. We've got a nice little herd of deer, and we'll have fox come by and coon and different things like that. I haven't seen a bobcat right here, but I know they come by occasionally. But we have a lot of feral cats, and they just decimate the pheasants around here. They're hard on birds. Well, I'll see that female. She's out there, and she's in an acre enclosure out there in one of my horse arenas where they kind of have a run where they can run, and they're not always penned up. They kind of have a communal run that they work in through the days and stuff. You see those other dogs, and they're laying around and stuff, and she'll be laying down too. All of a sudden, she will stand up, and that nose will go straight up in the air. And I mean, it's just like she goes on point. And I've seen her actually stand up on her hind legs, reaching high in the air to get the scent. And she'll come down off of that, and she will spin out almost and go across that arena, and she'll be pointed, and I'll start watching. I'll tell my wife, if we're out in the backyard or on the patio or something, says, "You watch." I says, "There's going to be a cat move out of that brush down in there before long." Sure enough, there it'll be. She's got it. She just wins it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's like I told you before, we're using those a lot in the law enforcement side because of that ability.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well,
there are quite some dry ground lion hunters, especially I know in Arizona, that are using German Shorthairs and German Shorthair crosses in some of the most rugged, bad country over there with phenomenal success.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
A guy by the name of Dave Carlson over around Prescott kind of started that some years ago, some of those strains. And there are several fellows over there that are using GSPs and GSP crosses very effectively on bare ground lion.
So are they half? Are they quarters? Are they eighths? I mean, what's he having the best success at? What type of cross?
Mostly halves, but he's got a couple of fulls that are just phenomenal. But they're silent. The fulls are silent.
Yeah.
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 Or they're silent until they see it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting.
And they are gritty. They're pressure. Boy, they're pressure bay dogs. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Quick, hard fighters. Yeah, and tough-footed, and can take a lot of heat.
Huh. Well, I mean, depending on what stock you have, I mean, a lot of those guys run those birds off of horseback.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, they're covering, like you said, 20 and 30 miles a day doing that.
Easy.
Yeah.
Easy. Yeah.
Before we wrap things up here, I have got to ask you the infamous question. You're a cat guy. You've been hunting hounds and cats and lions and stuff for over 50 years. Tell me your perspective, or tell me what you think on the odor, a lion actually shutting his odor off. Like I'm intrigued by that because I train and teach on the law enforcement side of humans. I run big game, and I run coons and bear. I've caught a couple bobcats on accident, never on purpose.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, but just give me your take. Like, tell me what you're seeing and what you think and what.
Well, where this whole theory started, and a lot of guys have talked about this for years, but Dale Lee, the famous Lee brothers in Arizona,
Mm-hmm.
he contended that a lion could control its scent and could actually kind of shut its scent down. He talked about being down in the White Mountains area, an area I've been in a lot, down around Blue River and Hannigan's Meadow, and he was up in that area where he was in the summertime. He was working these hounds. He'd get up high because it gets so dang hot. He'd get up there and hunt early and stuff, working those hounds on through the summer. Well, he had a road crew come by, the guys working on the highway, and they said he had a little camp right there alongside the highway, a little hound camp and stuff, and told him, Dale, we just about 8 miles down the road just had a lion run across the highway in front of us. You want to run it? And he goes, yeah. He says, I'll head right down there. So he loads up his horse or his mule, I can't remember which he was riding at the time, in his little trailer or truck, and gets a bunch of dogs, and he heads down there, and those guys show him right where the lion come across the road, And he says, okay. He says, I see the track and everything. So he said, he got some of the dogs out and stuff. They hadn't had a chance to clean out and everything. And those dogs kind of went up and hit on the back track a little bit, going the wrong way, And boy, they just blew right up on it, going the way the lion had come in, And he hollered them back, get back here, dogs, get back here, And he said, boy, they can sure smell it. Well, he took them across the highway, which is a blacktop highway. He took them across the blacktop highway, and they could not pick the track up. And he worked and he worked and he worked, and he actually saw tracks and different things and worked with the dogs. And some of these were pretty good dogs. And finally, he worked out about 400 yards or so, and the dogs started picking it up again. And I believe they went on and caught the lion. But his contention was that lion, it started this. He says that lion, when he gets up to that highway, he controls his scent because he's afraid, And he said, I've seen it before, Mm-hmm. Well, I think a lot of us that have hunted around even logging roads or that are being used, or trails or two tracks or whatever they are, where cars and stuff have gone down, we've had problems before, whether we're trailing a bear or whether we're trailing a bobcat or whatever it might be. When they come out and hit that road, a lot of times it seems the scent is altered somewhat. And it may be a mixture of, scent from automobiles, cars smell a lot, trucks smell a lot, diesels, who knows? And it's a mixing of scent. I don't know. I can't explain it. But in my mind, people, and I'm sure you being in law enforcement and stuff, in different situations, people, their body, their endocrine system reacts in a different manner, whether they're fearful, whether they're excited, whether they're mad, whether they're very sedate. I'm sure that their body odor is different. I know sometimes when you get in a high pressure situation and you're very nervous or you're very things like that, I mean, you start to perspire more or whatever. I don't know, but I don't think it's physically possible that they can absolutely just go back and shut that scent off, because those scent molecules are all over that body. There's skin cells, there's hair cells, there's all these different things. They're anal cells, they're urine and different things. And if you've ever smelled a lion, especially when you're up around a lion and close and they killed a lion and stuff, I mean, they'll gag you a lot of times. They've got a hard smell, especially those old toms. I mean, it'll make you want to throw up at times. Bear smells good compared to a lion. And His lions are rough at times, so they give off a different odor. But to say that they could just shut it off, well, maybe it's altered. I don't know. But I think sometimes they get to places where they may have laid up. And I've had this happen to me a lot. And I'm trailing along on a lion, and I've got that lion going pretty good. And I'm sometimes having to trot and gallop to catch up to the dogs. They're making some pretty good headway and stuff. And they'll get into a big boulder pile or something up in a kind of a shady pocket on a mountainside or something. And all of a sudden the track just poof, it's like it's gone. I got dogs casting this way, I got dogs casting that way, and they're around and around and around and around. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? I cannot figure this out. And I tie my horse up and get down there, and I find a lion track here. I find a lion track there in the sand or the mud and stuff. And what are you goofy dogs doing? And then your mind goes to playing tricks on you. Well, that lion came in here and he got out over the top and he's gone on, and so you stuck in there. Oh, I need to get on. I need to move, and I've done that before. Get on my horse, holler at the dogs, cut around where you can get up on top and think, well, we're going to pick it up here. He just slipped out over the top. Can't find a thing, nothing. Go back and go, what in the world? I got to try to sort these tracks out. And I've been around there for an hour and a half, 2 hours at times, figured out. And dogs are laying in the shade. They're getting tired. They're doing things like all of a sudden some old dog over here, boo, oh, start booger barking. And you walk over there and you get back at the crack of a rock and stuff, and there's that old lion laying back in there. He's laid up. He's gone in there and laid up, and his scent's pooled up in that area, and they can't figure it out. And it's just pooled up, and he's just got him baffled. He had him totally baffled. And that dog probably never would have found him if he didn't just bump right into him. And that old lion probably just growled at him, and that was it, because that scent just pulled up in there. So scent doesn't go completely away, but it does change.
Yeah, I'll go with that. Yeah, I know that, when we're chasing somebody that's run from us, and I'm talking about a human, not an animal. It's still a mammal. Still a mammal.
Absolutely.
Their adrenaline's dumping. We call it pheromones. They're pheromones of fear.
Sure.
They're dumping, and I've talked about this in I think a podcast or two, and I can see, like, when I've heard guys talk about that, like, I can visually see exactly what they're saying. And I can say that, yes, that's probably the best way to explain it, that, this X, Y, and Z's happened. But scent pools, and that's kind of what you're talking, scent pools, like, they kill us. And the way I will explain a scent pool, in fact, when I go to teach my tactical tracking class in March, this is something we go over, and we spend a lot of time on it. Your house, you take your house, that's nothing but a scent pool. It's got your odor all over it. So when we get a call for to track a missing juvenile, because we get that quite a bit, or somebody's run away, or maybe it's an autistic child, or it could be an adult, Alzheimer's patients. When we go to their house, we can't start that track in their house because it's too much odor. There's odor everywhere. Right. They live there. We start about 100-yard circles outside their residence and try to pick up the exit track. So how I equate what I'm hearing is that that animal lays down, and I'm just going to use a bedding area. I'll just talk about a bedding area, because we do it with bear too. I mean, our dogs do the exact same thing, and I've never thought of it in that manner as that animal shutting odor off. It's just never come to me that way. So a bear lays down, and let's just say that he's, like you said, he's in a hole. Okay, and the dogs trail into that area. But again, we've talked about earlier in the podcast is, if I'm trailing into an area, I'm not tracking anything over 12 hours old. Period. Dogs track into an area, and it's like they hit a wall. Boom. They come to a stop. They do what you just said. They kind of slow down, and they're kind of all over the place. They're going here, they're going there, especially if you're watching what's going on with your eyes. and they start circling and they're making loses, and your dogs that don't have the more experience or don't have the want to, they'll start dropping out. And then, like you said, that one old dog will figure out where that source of that odor is coming from. Or,
Right.
like what you said, he happened to cross that hole where that odor, where that bear's laying, and that odor pops right out. Oh, here it is. I got him. And then boom.
Yeah. Yeah, it can sure happen. And I've seen it happen. Just, boy, like they weren't smelling anything, and then all of a sudden have a lion just come right out of a hole and bang them, knock them off a rock. But I told you before a little bit about the scenario of watching dogs across the canyon trailing the bobcat.
Mm-hmm.
And you see the bobcat get up in front of the dogs, and he may be 200 yards ahead of them. He's just trotting along, and he'll stop every so often. He'll look back, and he's like, yeah, they're not going to catch me, And they're trailing, they're trying hard, they're mouthing, and they're going along. And he gets up about even with you, and you think, them stupid dogs aren't going to catch that cat. That's a good spotted belly cat. And you got your rifle there, and you say, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and shoot that cat because I could take him down to the fur bar, and I could buy some dog food, And you get up there, and you're wiggling around, and you've been breathing hard, and you miss. But you hit close to him, and that cat jumps straight in the air and takes off. I mean, lickety split. He's gone, tail over his back.
Yep.
And here come these dogs, they don't really hear the shot. They don't pay too much attention. You shoot a 22 or something, and they get right up to where that cat was, where you shot, and it's like they hit a stone wall. Boom. What? And they're casting this way, and they're casting that way. And it's like, where did the scent go? Did it go up in the air when the cat jumped up in the air and it's just totally gone? He no longer has scent. He shut it off because he got frightened. Mm-hmm. Well, it probably did alter. It probably did. He went from probably normal caution to extreme panic, extreme panic. And here again, everybody's, his scent's gone. You're not going to get him. And here again's the smart dog, that smart cat dog. He's like, I got to start cutting forward. I'm moving forward. I got the cup to progress it, wind up. Out there 200, 250 yards sometimes. Boo! He's got it again. And it's changed, but that cat's gone back into his normal mode of travel, and they pick it up. And it's that dog that'll drive through, and he's the one that'll catch it. Mm-hmm. And it did alter, but it didn't shut off. It changed. Mm-hmm. And those dogs, like I say, I really do believe that their scenting ability is a lot like a computer. It filters out everything else, and it's locked onto that one thing. That's why bloodhounds can do some of the phenomenal things they've done over the years. He's got that grid pattern in there, and he's locked into that. And I don't care if he comes by and there's a skunk laying there or whatever. He just trails right on through it because he's locked onto that. That's right. But when it changes rapidly, quickly changes, I mean, then the system failure, light comes on and everybody's casted around, and the other guy that over here is smart enough to key in something else, and away he goes. So it's a fascinating game, a fascinating sport. And you mentioned about that scent pooling. I'll step into my bird dog world for a minute here. This happened some years ago, but we were up in North Dakota hunting pheasants. Cold weather, no snow on the ground, but it's cold, bitter wind stuff. We were in heavy cover, high weeds, what they call CRP fields, and hunting. And I had two short hairs that I trained, and one was young and the other one was an older dog. The other gentleman was had a Labrador, and we got in, and there were quite a few pheasants in there. And we had some guys that were, they were from one of my brother-in-laws owned a big farm up there, and they were from some of his university buddies and different things and stuff. And they weren't the best shots in the world, but they were having fun. But they winged down a couple of birds that couldn't be found. I knew they were hit pretty good, but they couldn't find him. And everybody was tramping around in there, and there was probably, 8 guys and three dogs at least, and going around in there, and they just couldn't come up with the wounded birds, wind, bitter, cold, and everything. And those guys were kind of feeling dejected and everything like that. And I said, you guys just go on. And I told my son was with me, and I says, you take Bill, that was the young short hair, you take Bill with you. And I says, I'll pick these birds up. I says, but we got to get these guys out of here and clear all the scent and all the confusion out of here. And I said, then I'll put Dot to work, And so they left and they went on, and I waited about, I might have waited 30 minutes. I bet I did. And I thought I was hunt dead, And she went in there, and in less than 5 minutes, she found both of those roosters. And one of them was still alive and had went into a badger hole. Had actually gone down into a badger hole, and she was digging when I got to that, but she was able to get his tail feather and then pull him out. But, with everything else in there, they couldn't find it. But once that all cleared out, and that experienced dog, and she was driven to find it, and I was just showed up and I said, "Here's your birds. Why couldn't we find it before?" I says, "Too much smell."
No, you're right. That odor laid down, and when it dropped, you were able to. We do that a lot in like big chaotic scenes. Like we've got a lot of officers and a lot of stuff going on. Like we do the exact same thing. Like, you're just taking the hunting thing, and I'm doing it in the law enforcement realm. The same exact thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I feel like it's interesting. I always like to hear, and I can visualize a lot of stuff that I hear about odor, and I talked to Dr. Nathan Hall, who's at Texas Tech and does research, and I begged him to do research study on odor. Like I was like, you got to do it on odor. You got to do it on odor, and or scent off of people. And of course, there's just not their need for it. So he's like, nobody's going to spend the money on that. But yeah, it's always intriguing to me to listen and to hear and learn. And I don't care what type of animal you're pursuing with a hound. I feel like we all see that same type of behavior at some point in time if you're paying attention.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mentioned a really great book that a lot of hunters should try to get their hands on if they can. And it's hard to find. It's out of print, but it's a great book, and it really explains a lot about conditions as scent and a lot of different animals. It was written in Great Britain, so there is some differences in the quarry that they're hunting, but they are hunting people. This gentleman that wrote it, his name is H.M. Budget. That's Budgett. H.M. Budget. He's the ex-master of the Bymister and Warden Hill Hounds. And it's just a fascinating study what he did. And really, he was really, really meticulous with his work that he did. And I think everybody that would read this, if they really sit down and read it and stuff, would say, "Oh, I see why that happened. Now I see why that happened. I see why that day looked like it was going to be such a good hunting day, but it wasn't. It was a terrible day. And why the dogs couldn't hardly do anything. And a week before, they acted like they were world beaters, But in his end of this thing, he says, it's hunting by scent. He goes through the whole thing. His famous little saying is, "Constant only in its inconsistency. There's nothing so queer as scent, except a woman."
Yeah. But it is. Every minute changes. Right. I had a meteorologist. She had me on one of our local news stations to talk about weather and stuff with the dogs. It's just like a 15-minute blurb, and everything's constantly changing. The sun's out, then it's behind a cloud. The temperature's going up, it's going down. The humidity's going up, it's going down. The barometric pressure's changing. Like, so many different things play factors into odor or scent. Let's talk about scent. And
there's so many things and so many kinds of terrain and different things. But I noticed this before I read this book, and he pounds it home. When your ground temperature is warmer than your air temperature, your scenting conditions are going to be better.
Yep.
And when your ground temperature is colder than your air temperature, it's going to be tougher. It's just
makes sense.
It pulls it down. Yeah. Well, it's been great talking to you, Heath. I do want to carry on and visit a little bit more about some of the trailing stuff that they're doing out there as well with your man trailing.
Yeah. So Jeff, sorry, Mike. I was thinking when you said man trailing, Jeff Jetler come to my mind. But Mike, I appreciate you coming on and spending some time with me and, talking dogs and scent. It's always a pleasure. And like I said, 2008 kind of started, my my reaching out to you, and you were always very helpful to me and helping me with questions and stuff that I asked, and I really do appreciate that. So
you're welcome. I was lucky enough to have some very good mentors. We talked about Leo and a few other people that came along later in life that I'd have quit long ago if that hadn't happened, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel if I can share just a little bit, that'll help a little bit in some way, to especially young people that are getting into it or wanting to get into it and stuff. I'd gladly do it, you know.
Yeah. But the end of every podcast, I end it with this. And Mike, I really appreciate you helping us teach, train, and learn.